All right, we are on chapter 13 of Devil's Bridge, and he's going back out to fish for the last time before the derby is over. Climbing the cliffs to the cave, I thought briefly of the big man. He could be around, I supposed, but I wasn't worried. He must have figured out by now that I was no threat to him anymore. He and Freddie had won. I checked the conditions, southwest wind. Good. I wouldn't have to cast again. I wouldn't have to cast against it. But there was enough chop on the water to keep the fish from being nervous. Tide was on the way out. That was good too. It would be changing, coming in just about twilight. In the cave, I ran my fingers over Pop's initials, carved in the grayish clay. J-U-D. Jackson Ulysses Daggett. He'd never liked the Ulysses part, saying it sounded too fancy for a fisherman. A man only needed two names, he said, a last name and a first name. He'd persuaded Mom to name me just Benjamin Daggett, nothing in the middle, which was fine by me. I didn't pick up my fishing things right away, but sat on the floor of the cave on my sleeping bag, looking at Pop's initials. I took out my pocket knife and carved my initials, B.D., next to Pop's, Benjamin Daggett. That's who I was, Jack Daggett's son. Then I picked up my rod and the red bucket and headed for the beach. The fishing was slow. There were no birds working along the beach, but I kept casting mechanically, the repetitive motion and the continuous rhythm of the waves lulling me into a peaceful kind of trance. I took time out to eat my sandwiches and then began casting again. Hours must have passed because all at once I realized with a start that it was growing dark. In front of me, the huge red sun was sinking into the sea, and behind me, the full moon was rising against a blue-black, star-filled sky. The tide was rushing in. Tiny fingers of foam reached past my feet and receded, passing over hundreds of small rocks with a gentle rumble. Casting, I had the oddest feeling of being somewhere I'd never been before. It was a place that was on the edge of everywhere, between day and night, and between land and sea. I knew it had to be getting close to 6 o'clock, but still, I kept casting, caught by the glow of the sky and the strange feeling I had inside. Suddenly, there was a tug at the end of my line. It felt big and heavy and dead, like a log or an old tire. I pulled back, trying to feel my lure, but it was hard into something solid, something big. Great way to end the night, I thought, getting stuck on the bottom. And then the bottom started to move. Whatever was on the end of my line was heading steadily out to sea. It had to be a fish, a big, strong fish from the feel of it. I hadn't seen anything. I hadn't heard anything. There had been no jumps or no wasted energy, just the tug. And now my line spinning rapidly off the reel. If this kept up, I'd soon be out of line. I tried to remember what to do in a situation like this. I listened for Pop's voice, and soon I heard it. Don't try to fight him now. He's too strong. Let him run. Let him get tired. Check your drag. You want just enough pressure to slow him down, make him work, but not so much that he breaks off. There was nothing to do but hang on, so I did. My heart was beating so wildly that I felt as if my blood were rushing through me like the tide. I held on, watching the line spin out. There wasn't much left. I had to take a chance. I tightened the drag, hoping I could tire the fish out before it broke off or I ran out of line. There were just a few more curls of line on the reel, and the fish was still swimming. I was preparing to feel its full strength, preparing for the disappointment when it came to the end of my line and broke free. But then it stopped. There was no pull on the end of the line. At first, I thought the line had broken. Carefully, I pulled back. It was still there, resting. I lifted the rod tip and lowered it, reeling as the tip came down. I lifted again and reeled. Again. I was gaining on the fish, but already my arms were tiring from the great weight of it. Lift, reel, lift, reel. Then the drag squealed loudly as the fish made another run, taking out almost all the line I had just gained. Again, it stopped to rest. Again, I worked it in, reeling and lifting for what seemed like hours. Suddenly, out beyond the waves, I saw it for the first time. A huge shape broke the surface and struggled briefly, then disappeared. It was gigantic. It was the biggest fish I'd ever seen. In a sudden panic, I was sure I'd never get this fish in. I began thinking of all the things that could go wrong. A careless knot could come undone. A weak spot in the line could snap. The hook could straighten out or break. The fish could make a quick run. The line could get wrapped around a clump of seaweed or a submerged piece of wood. Several more times we repeated our struggle, me lifting and reeling until my arms felt like lead. the fish somehow turning its head and heading out to sea once more. And then I could almost feel the fight go out of it. It was still heavy, hard to reel in, but I could tell that for the moment it was exhausted. Soon I could see it clearly in the shallow water, and I gasped. This was the time when a fisherman had to be extra careful, the time when one false move could mean losing the fish. But I wasn't thinking about that. I was looking at the biggest, strongest, most beautiful striped bass I had ever seen. It was almost as big as I was. My hands were shaking with fatigue and excitement as I watched it shining and flashing in the moonlit water, the black stripes standing out boldly against the silver green sides, its eye enormous, looking into mine and taking my measure. I knew what I was supposed to do. I knew I should drag the fish high up onto the beach so it couldn't get away. But I just stood there, looking with wonder at this miracle that had appeared at my feet, this mysterious creature that had come to me from the sea. A distant part of my mind registered its length and girth and knew it had to be the biggest fish ever, bigger than Pop's. This was the fish that would beat Freddy's, that would win the Derby and $10,000. The fish that could buy me a boat. The fish that would keep the Daggett name at the top of the record board. But none of that seemed real. What was real was the power and beauty of this fish and the amazing fact of its existence. The fish had come to me, Ben Daggett, from out of the vastness of the ocean, and I knew I wouldn't kill it. I didn't want to see this fish thrashing in the sand, gasping for breath, its brilliant colors fading as its life drained away. Fish don't care about record books, and at that moment, neither did I. I reached down and lifted the hook from its mouth. I turned it until it was pointing out to sea, my hands touching its slippery smoothness. I pushed and pulled its great body into deeper water and gently moved it forward and back until its strength began to return. With a quick shivering motion, it suddenly broke from my grasp, flailed briefly in the shallows, and then disappeared in the dark, swirling water. So he let the fish go. Think about your opinion on that and if you agree or not. I think I knelt there for a long time, the waves washing softly around my waders, my hands outstretched in a gesture of release. And I don't know how to explain it, but during those moments or those seconds or those hours, something happened. When I let the fish go, I felt a lot go along with it. The anger and the pain I'd been living with since Pop died, the fear of living without him, even the rage about Freddie and the big man and their cheating seemed to disappear into the sea behind my fish. I understood now why Pop's record hadn't mattered much to him, and I understood that Pop was a whole lot more to me than his name carved at the top of that board. For the first time, I knew that I still had the best parts of Pop. They were inside of me, part of me, Ben Daggett. I had the feeling that Pop was watching and that he was proud.